Now for this week's main program, it's my pleasure to bring to the podium young Rotary leader member Tabitha Klaus to introduce our featured speaker today. Tabitha is the Director of Development at Neighbor Care Health. Please.
Hello, everyone. We are honored to have Dr. Karen Johnson as our lunchtime speaker today. Dr. Johnson has dedicated her life and career to advancing racial equity in government. She earned a master's in public administration and a doctorate from Old Dominion University. After completing her education, Dr. Johnson worked as a public servant in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where she managed equal opportunity employment programs. Fortunately for us, Dr. Johnson eventually made her way to Washington State. Here she served our state in multiple ways, including as the director of Tri-Love Ministries in Seattle, an adjunct faculty at the Evergreen State College, where she taught courses on dismantling racism and identifying bias in public service settings, and as the Equity and Inclusion Administrator of the Washington State Department of Corrections. Just the last year in 2021, recognizing Dr. Johnson's unique talents and passions, Governor Inslee named her as the inaugural director of the newly created Washington State Office of Equity. In this role, Dr. Johnson is a nationwide leader in promoting access to equitable opportunities and resources that reduce disparities and improve outcomes statewide across state government. Dr. Johnson has dove right into this role, and her office has already met with over 1,000 disadvantaged Washingtonians to learn from them what improving outcomes for all would look like. Dr. Johnson will be joining us via Zoom due to her busy legislative session obligations. We're honored to have her take time out of her schedule today and speak with us on the new Washington State Office of Equity, bridging opportunity gaps and reducing disparities in our communities. Please welcome Dr. Johnson.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Thumbs up. Thank you. You know, it's always a pleasure to be in the presence of Rotarians. And I have to, well, let me do protocol first. I see that President James Collins is not with you, so thank you, past President Jeff, for stepping in. Greetings, President-elect Beth Knox. But see, it was Nancy Cahill who got me started today. And because I've been asked to run my own PowerPoint presentation, I've changed it. So I'm not quite sure if you have a handout, but whatever you might have, I'm going to do something different today. Because you see, your program today has touched me profoundly. And the role and the work that we have before us to serve to change lives is great. And you see, I probably could have opened with a joke. I planned to be with you today, but unfortunately I was unable to come and join you. Thank you, Tabitha, for that wonderful introduction. For a minute there, I was wondering who you were talking about. But then as I listened, I began to realize why I'm absolutely exhausted when I listen to what is set before us. But see, Nancy opened with Ruth. And then she talked about the Apostle Paul. She then took us to President Lincoln and shared with us words from Rosa Parks. Reminded us what President John F. Kennedy had to say, Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela said, things seem impossible until they're done. Well, we can certainly testify to that after hearing the moment about Clarice's life. And I would just really invite you to join me in properly recognizing a gold, bronze, and silver medal winner. Incredible, because like Nelson Mandela, she learned that things couldn't seem impossible until they are done. And so I'm delighted to be with you today because our office fundamentally works to support everyone in Washington, making sure that they have full access to the opportunities, the power, and resources that they need to really flourish and achieve their full potential. I don't know about you, but where I come from as a Rotarian, that sounds like service above self is what is going to be needed to bring the day in. So who's most burdened? Our office was established because the legislatures found that people who've been left out, left behind, systematically excluded, they still do not have the same opportunities to meet parity as others who are not been marginalized across nearly every measure, including education, health, wealth, employment, and more. And in my original slide deck, I was going to show you data and all that. I was like, why be boring today? This is your lunchtime. You're having a great lunch at Weston. I'm missing delicious chocolate dessert, so I sure hope somebody will eat some chocolate cake for me. But I was reminded of Maslow when I thought about why our office was established, Abraham Maslow. He talked about needs that every human being has, wants, needs to be fulfilled in order to self-actualize or to flourish and achieve their full potential. But what we have before us now in this nation are people of color, people with disabilities, people who've been marginalized, still have a steeper hill to climb in order just to meet basic needs. And certain things need to be met. So our office, building on the work of King County leaders in this work, their equity and social justice work, they identified 14 determinants of equity. What needs to be in place? What are those conditions that people need in their lives to thrive? Things like equitable law and justice, economic development. And thank you, Sue Bennett, for joining Rotary 4 and bringing your gifts and talents to the table to raise up leaders for tomorrow, because fundamentally, we're going to need leaders like yourself, Rotarians, to create that environment, leading in King County to provide affordable, safe, quality housing, making sure that people have access to affordable, healthy, local food, that there's affordable early childhood development, strong, vibrant neighborhoods, and the like. So these are some of the components of our statewide equity strategic plan that we plan to announce March 21st. We plan to have a governor's event. Governor Inslee will sign the documents, and we'll have convening with community members, some of the thousands of people that Tabitha mentioned that we talked about, met with last year, to tell us, well, what does equity and justice for all really look like in Washington State, and aren't we already there? Well, we have some work to do, and I'm hoping that we can look to you to join us in this work. Fundamentally, the work of our office is really to ensure that the people who are most burdened have the opportunity to experience health, wealth, and well-being without disadvantages stemming from any social condition, the work that you all do. When I took a short trip on Rotary International's website, I'm like, well, what does Rotary International even have to say about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And on this slide, you can see that all the work that I'm sure you're doing work internationally as well as in the community, and that's great. This is what Rotarians are all about, making a difference, service above self, making sure that whatever we think, say, or do, it's true, it's fair to all concerned, it builds goodwill and better friendships, and it's beneficial to all concerned. So then I said, well, what are you doing in the area of anti-racism? Because we really can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion for all until we deal with some of the historical systemic oppressions buried in racism, sexism, homophobia, other isms that need to be addressed. So I looked for anti-racism in Rotary. What are you doing? Because Angela Davis said that in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. And as you all know, we're even having a conversation nationally about, does racism exist? What is really the historical truth around our nation? But, you know, four-way test of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? I would invite and challenge all Rotarians to stand up and find out our truth so that we can begin to walk in the words of Nancy, that she brought us through Ruth and the Apostle Paul and in Proverbs 31, so that we could start walking in forgiveness and acknowledging harm and moving it to a place of healing so that we can come in reconciliation and transformation. I don't know if your club is having any membership challenges, probably not, being one of the most oldest and most prestigious clubs in our district, in this part of the nation. But many Rotarian clubs are struggling with membership. And I would even submit that a lot might have something to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, always remember that I look younger than I am. And so when I became a Rotarian last century, it was groundbreaking, because back on the East Coast, Rotarians were male and they were white for the most part, definitely not women. And so when I was invited to be a member of the Altoona Sunrise Rotary Club last century, that was groundbreaking. Here in the Pacific Northwest, I see that more women are Rotarians, but what about people of color? What about people with disabilities? What about? And if you are indeed tired about hearing about racism, well, imagine how tired people are experiencing it. I had the pleasure of going to Selma, Alabama in December of 2019 for the premiere opening of the movie Just Mercy that Brian Stevenson put together before it went national, dealing with mass incarceration in the nation. I drove from Montgomery to Selma because I wanted to walk the Edmund Pettus Bridge from Selma to Montgomery. You see, Dr. King thought that that was a failure in his life. And so I wanted to walk as far as I could from Selma to Montgomery, thinking that perhaps that small act might translate into a more equitable and just society in the 21st century. When I got to Selma, I rolled up on the Selma Interpretive Center. It is like their museum. And the bench, though, that caught my attention outside of that center was by Rotary. The Selma Rotary Club is the one who provided that bench so that people like me coming from across the nation, from across, I'm sure, the world, who come to that site had a place to rest and sit as we were taking a tour through history. And so my question fundamentally to you today, Seattle for Rotarians, is what are you doing? What are you doing to ensure that 100 years from now, the elders, when opening the book and go to the chapter about what happened in Washington State in 2020, and they talk about a group of people who in 2022 decided that they were going to do all that they could to make sure that that trajectory of society bent toward equity and justice for all, for their generation and generations to come. And they talk about and describe for the children of that day how they're able to go to any school that get a quality education, no matter what their zip code, that they're able to put food on their table and diapers on their baby, and have a roof over their head. That's going to be their inheritance because of what the people in Washington State in 2022 did. And then if they perhaps get sick, they're not going to go bankrupt to take care of their health care. What will your chapter be in that book? And when the children of that day ask, well, what is this racism and sexism and all these other isms y'all dealt with? Because they have no frame of reference, because they have grown up in a multicultural society where every human life was valued and treated with respect and a sense of belonging in this place called society that we share together. The elders of the day will have to say to the children who ask the question, Google it, or whatever the equivalent will be 100 years from now. AI it, whatever. What are you doing? What are you going to continue to do to ensure there's equity and justice for all now and generations to come? And in the words of the late John Lewis, never ever, Seattle for Rotarians, be afraid to make some noise and get in some good necessary trouble. thank you for your time today. I appreciate your attention. I do believe we have time for some questions. Be a gift to the world. That was the theme the year I was president. And we joined together by being a gift to the world. We really can serve to change lives, because fundamentally, it really is service above self. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. J. I wanted to kick us off and remind everyone that Seattle 4 last year developed our own diversity, equity, and inclusion statement.
Oh, wonderful.
On our own website. We've got an action plan in place that we are trying to implement. I will tell you, it's not very easy and it's slow going slog, but we're working it. And I hope that all of you are going to get involved with that.
Thank you for saying that. I miss seeing it.
Questions for Dr. J? Yep, coming your way.
Okay. Hi, this is Nicole Klein. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I don't know where to look, but you did such a great job in listening to all of us at the beginning. That was impressive. My question was, since you are Rotarian and know our capacity for doing, what do you think we should do here in Seattle with our collective energy and voices and activism? A couple ideas.
Thank you for your question. And unlike past president Jeff, I actually resigned, but my club didn't take my resignation after my presidency, so I guess I am still a Rotarian. I would suggest right now that King County has an equity and social justice leader, as does, and there's also the equity and social justice office in the city and the county. I would suggest, and I would imagine that one of you in that club knows either Vasaskia Cockrell or who's overseeing that work in the city. Matias Venezuela is over at the King County Public Health Department. I would suggest coming together and having a conversation, maybe even with the new mayor about what is the direction for the city, what are the greatest needs, and how can you engage. And whoever is on the community foundation or projects committee or whatever different committees that you might have, come up with a project next year. I would also commend reaching out to, what's his name, council member Zamale. I know he is connected with a group in King County entitled Washington Equity Now, and they have been identifying areas of work necessary in schools, as well as in community development, around land trust, for some specific, very specific needs. I'm not quite sure if the African American Museum is still open. Lanisha.
They are.
Okay, she's there. I'm sure that she also be a great person to chat with. And because typically Rotarians think about in terms of projects, at least our clubs did. We think in terms of projects that we could do short term and long term, and maybe be able to talk with her about what you could do there to preserve the history. Carice, I know our club did microloans, and we picked women in other countries and gave them microloans to help them start their businesses. Perhaps there's an opportunity to do some of that work here in King County. And again, I think that's a conversation with the mayor, conversation with the council, conversation with the Equity and Social Justice Office in King County. So off the top of my head, those are just some of the connections that I would suggest that you consider to think about what you might want to do moving forward.
All right.
Great question.
Jay, we have a question from the Zoom. With education key to success of all children, what do you think about options like charter schools and private schools to traditional public schools?
Well, I'm sure that those of you at the sound of my voice, you don't know me well, but you can probably figure that the Office of Equity is in favor of any kind of school that is going to make sure that all children have an access, have a shot at life. You know, when you think about in our history, historically, Black colleges and universities are what we would today call charter schools, because children who look like me were not welcome in public school districts. And when we think about the Brown versus Topeka Board of Education case in 1954, I haven't done the math lately, but it's been a few years since we as a nation rule segregation illegal, separate but equal in education illegal in this nation. Yet the slide, one of the slides I deleted from my original slide deck showed that we still have much work to do around making sure that all children graduate. So I'm absolutely in favor of any charter schools, home schools, any school that is going to ensure that all of our brilliant babies understand their brilliance, that maximizes their gift and ensures that they have the education to be competitive and capable adults in this global technological society.
Question from Commander Center.
Doctor, thank you for your inspiring presentation. And I want to tell you, I want to brag for a second. You said so many kind things about Rotary and our club. I'm proud to say that we've had 2 women of color that are already past presidents of our club, and I think it says a lot about our membership.
Yes,
but I really wanted to take this chance to compliment you and ask you a question. All of us have gotten used to Zooming over the past 2 years, and you have an extraordinary gift because your charisma comes through on Zoom like gangbusters. I don't know how you do that, but it's incredible. Don't you agree? I mean, you look like some high-priced television personality, only really smart. What gets you fired up every morning when you get out of bed that gives you the gas to do this tough work?
Thank you for that question and the compliment. You're too kind. It would have to be my faith. My faith in God is just really, that's my answer. Back in the day when I was younger and thought I knew more and learned about Rotary, when I heard service above self and I looked at the 4-way test, I thought this is the way for me to live out my faith each and every day. So Rotary will always have a special place for me, because when I was a new young green leader, it was, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will be beneficial to all concerned? As a young leader, I was trying to figure out, how do I operate the words and teachings of Christ in a public environment, federal government environment? And Rotary, the 4-way test, was a way for me to operationalize it. And being able to make a difference in someone's life and to do all 4 of those things each and every day in my life as life work now, as we build this Office of Equity, is what gets me up and out of the bed each and every day.
Great question. Now we have a direct question from our esteemed colleague, John Bridge. On Bridge.
While we're waiting for John, I've got one here. Shall we have Marcia ask her question while we're waiting for John?
Okay. Hi, Dr. J. I missed you at the Tacoma Black Collective. I think you spoke there a few weeks ago. I'm a resident of Pierce County. But my question is about your background. You didn't share very much about that, because how does a Black woman growing up in America last century and beyond facing all these obstacles and whatever society has, and how do you get to that place of standing in your power and getting to where you're, believing in yourself so much? Because I mentor young people, and I have young children that I'm raising in America. I was born in Southern Africa myself. But just trying to understand how you get to that place of saying, here I am, I'm in America, despite all the obstacles, but nothing will stop me. Just how do you arrive at that? Thank you.
Ooh, Marcia, let's see, what's the agenda? 123, past president is going to thank me. So it's funny you should ask that question. Those were 2 slides I deleted out of the slide deck. The first one is where I would have shared with you that I am Karen Johnson, go by Dr. J, Dr. K, KJ, an over 40 melanin-rich queen of African, Blackfoot, Cherokee, Japanese, Jewish, Seminole descent. I'm a cisgender, heterosexual woman of faith, so she, her, beloved are my pronouns. Dad figured out our genealogy before Ancestry.com was a thing and left me the family tree and the family Bible before he transitioned to his eternal resting place. I was born in upstate New York in a time post-civil rights, so I had an opportunity and access to free, quality education. And I had white teachers who told me that I could do anything I wanted to do, which was not a newsflash, by the way, because my family had already told me that. I was educated at Syracuse University, so March Madness is my favorite time of year. Basketball, Syracuse, although they're in the ACC, I still have forgiven them, but nevertheless, March Madness is my favorite time of year. Basketball, went to Syracuse, went to master's in Old Dominion University, got my master's in public administration, as well as my doctorate in urban services. When I was in Virginia, I then moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I started off as an occupational therapist, went into oversee 44 Midwestern hospitals in 14 Midwestern states, from North Dakota down to Missouri, over to Ohio and everything in between. Gave up my career. From there went over to Pennsylvania, Altoona, about 40 miles south of State College, equidistance between Pittsburgh and Philly, to be the very first associate director, what we would call now chief operating officer of a VA medical center. Gave up my money, my family, my career to come to the Pacific Northwest in 1997 to do what I call missionary work. This is missionary work. Missionaries help people to succeed. I've always been a Dallas Cowboy fan because my brother was a Washington Redskin fan. And so when Dallas was out of the Super Bowl, I Googled Russell Wilson to find out what the big deal was about him. When I saw Virginia pop, I said, I know this child is not related to Dr. Lucy Wilson and Dr. Harrison B. Wilson. You see, when I was in Virginia, Dr. Wilson was running Norfolk State. His wife, Lucy, was Vice President of Academic Affairs at Old Dominion. And when I showed up at Old Dominion, I was told I wasn't accepted. I'm like, well, the letter's right here. Long story short, after a conversation with Dr. Lucy Wilson, I was able to matriculate to go to work on my master's. And the dean of the Masters of Public Administration program was not present that quarter. I never knew what happened to her until I Googled her grandson, Russell Wilson, and realized that Dr. Lucy Wilson realized I was being discriminated against. I didn't even know it. And of course, I asked God to just go ahead and let the Seahawks win, and they had certainly won that year. Now, I didn't know I had to pray the next year because I thought they knew what to do when they're down there at the goalpost, they can win the Super Bowl. But be that as it may, I digress. And so my personal, professional, and spiritual development is what helps me to know who I am, why I am here, how I'm going to show up in this context called society, and what legacy I'm going to leave behind, because no one in the world can be the best Dr. J except for me. And I have no competition being me, because no one can do what I do because no one is me. And that is the same with you. No one can beat you being you. Find out who you are and be sure to show up before you die.
Two quick questions for Dr. J as we wrap up. You can see in the room you're getting a standing O. First question is, Dr. J, where'd you get those shoes? I'm sure you've heard that question before. Dating myself asking that. And then number two, you obviously joined Rotary at the age of 10. What year was that?
Obviously, at the age of 10, that's my story, and we're sticking to it. It was
What year was that?
It was 1997.
Well, just another fun fact, our club played a role in helping women first join Rotary all the way back in '87. And so we're going to continue working with you and others to forward our mission of diversity in the club. And Dr. J, in recognition of your generous time with us today, Seattle 4 has contributed to Harvest Against Hunger, a Rotary District 5030 project, as well as a nonprofit which provides healthy meal components to regional food banks in our state.
Yes.
100 servings of fresh produce have been donated in your name.
Thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you, Dr. J.
Thank you, Rotarians.